Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lloyd Smith. I grew up in Mississippi County, Missouri on a little row crop farm, and I would like to be the next congressperson from the 8th Congressional District. Many of you may know me from the years that I worked for Bill Emerson first and then Joanne. I'm now at the Republican Party, but before that, I worked extremely hard with many of you on the issues. I stand before you today as a constitutional conservative. I'm pro-life, for lower taxes, and want to stand up for the Second Amendment. But ultimately, what we are about to see in the next 4 years is something that strikes at the very heart of freedom and liberty. And that really comes down to this. We are facing a red menace. When I grew up at that little town of East Prairie, we used to hide under the desk because we were worried about a nuclear attack. We called that the red menace of communism. We are now faced with a red menace of debt. Over $16 trillion in debt. Over 200,000 for every family of 4 in this nation. And by 2022, with this administration's extended budget, we would be over $26 trillion in debt. I stand before you today to tell you the first thing that we need in this country is a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. The next thing that we need with this Congress is for the House of Representatives to be the firewall against what this administration is doing. That means we have to tie up the purse strings of this administration. We have to stop the executive orders on everything from cap and trade, which didn't pass the Congress, but they implemented on coal-fired power plants. We have to stand up to administration that use executive order to overturn a law duly passed that is all about welfare to work. They passed an executive order just to overturn that. What we have to do in the House of Representatives is use the purse strings to stop the executive orders. I have been there and done that. I have worked for congresspersons in the trenches. I have watched what the overreach of burdensome regulation can do. It's doing it right now in the ONSR. They're trying to pass a management plan to restrict the ability of you, the citizens of our state, to be able to access that wonderful facility. They use it in the national forest. By closing roads, they close roads and then they make it too expensive for you to be able to log. And let me tell you, at the end of the day, the only way to stop overburden regulation is to stop feeding the beast. You've got to cut off the plasma of the money that feeds bureaucracy. When you do that, you get their attention, you narrow their ability to impress upon you on the brow of the people what they shouldn't be impressing upon you, and that's overburden regulation, overburdening taxes, and they're doing it, and they're cutting off our freedom and our liberty. Thank you.
Okay, first question. In selecting our candidate, we expect to do better. We want Missouri to do better. We're close to losing what has made us strong and what makes America great. Our country is $16 trillion in debt. Our current leader wants a blank check. Joanne Emerson votes yes on what they were calling over the cliff. How do you think that could have been handled differently?
I think we really lost the argument on the over the cliff vote back in August of 2011. Because we then bought into the concept, and that's how we got to this cliff. We bought into that concept that we had to do something, we had to pass that debt ceiling one more time. And I think the expectation was, well, we'll do this, and then after the election, we will have the U.S. Senate, we will have the power, and we will have the White House, and we will stop what we now call the physical cliff. So my answer is pretty short. I do not think that the vote for the fiscal cliff was the right vote. And I do not think that the debt limit that we're facing in the early spring of 2013, we should give the president the authority to raise the debt limit on his own, and we should not give this president the authority to do anything until we take a serious look at spending.
Next question. There are 435 House districts in the U.S. Our district is rated the 8th poorest, and out of all the districts in Missouri, it is rated the poorest. The median income is $27,865, with the household income in Dent County $32,991. What are your plans to change this?
You know, a couple of the things that we need to do, you know, obviously in this congressional district, the #1 industry is agriculture. We have long thought that we, now with some of our better transportation systems, with Highway 60 and some of these other avenues up and down the Mississippi River, we ought to be doing a better job of what we call value added to agriculture. I think that is one of the areas that we can work on to improve our way of life. The other thing is one of the big areas in this district is recreation. I think we need to do a better job of promoting our area, promoting all the different facets that we have, whether it's the clear running streams of the Ozarks, the Mississippi River, the hiking trails that we have, the 1.2 million acres of the National Forest that lie within the boundaries of the 8th District. But most importantly, when you go back to the very first, I think we've got to secure our future by stopping the increase in the debt, because our kids will not be able to survive in the future. And to do that, I think we need to move forward with a conservative in this district.
The candidate selected for this vacancy will have to be capable of raising money. It's rumored in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. Do you feel you're capable to raise the required funds it will take to win this race? If so, please tell us how you plan to do that.
Well, many of you may have gotten my letter, and I appreciate the committee here today for all of your service to your areas, to your county, and to your country. In 1988, it was the second congressional campaign I managed. Imagine this, we raised $1 million in a campaign. In 2002, I assisted Jim Talent, and we raised over $10 million. I do know the way to raise money is twofold. One, you need the grassroots support, and you need to raise money at the $10, the $5, the $20, and the $100 level. But you also need to approach those groups, whether it be a Farm Bureau or other groups that are interested in your values and what you believe in, and ask them to be a part of the process. I like the smaller donations as well, as I mentioned on the front end, because they're investing in your campaign. If you get a $10 contribution, I guarantee you, you're going to get that vote. And we've done picnics and we've done fundraisers, but most of all, I think we need to make sure that we have the resources to win and to get our message out. We cannot let this district go Democratic.
There's been much talk about gun control here in the Ozarks. Most of us have and use guns. This level of freedom is something to be thankful for. We always want to keep this freedom. The person we select, we want to know without a shadow of a doubt that that person would vote to keep this freedom if it comes to that. Please discuss your views on Second Amendment rights.
You know, I don't believe the Second Amendment is very wishy-washy. I read it. It's a part of the Bill of Rights. It is a part of what our founding fathers did initially, right after they wrote the Constitution. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the Second Amendment. I think it's sacred. I think it's extremely sacred to all of you, but I also think it's constitutional. And if you didn't notice, in the last couple of days, they floated the trial balloon. And remember earlier when I spoke about those executive orders? This administration is looking to use the executive order, the committee that Joe Biden is heading, going to suggest to the president he use the executive order to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. That is wrong. I think it's unconstitutional, and the only way to stop it is to use the purse strings to stop it and then change the presidency.
We felt this was important enough to add this question. What is your position on stem cell research?
You know, I've long been opposed to stem cell research. I think there are other ways to achieve that. One of my old bosses voted differently than I suggested. Someone asked me the other day, why when your boss votes a certain way, do you have to agree with them? And I explained it like this. A lieutenant colonel or a colonel in the United States Army can go in and tell the general what they really think. They can go in and say, I don't believe this is what we ought to do in battle. But I did oppose Joanne's position on her stem cell vote. I remember when it was. It was in 2005. It was May. And I got the call, and my wife was actually in Rochester, Minnesota, having an extensive hip surgery. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I just said, I think that's a wrong vote, not just for the district, but I think it's wrong personally.
Last, we don't want a candidate that will take the easy path and put tough decisions off for another day. Our children and our grandchildren's futures are at stake. Convince us that you wouldn't do that, and convince us why you are the best candidate for this vacancy.
My dad was a World War II veteran. He got the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. He turned over this country to my generation better than I got it. I mean, it is better than he lived it, and we got a better country because of what he did. I want to be able to turn over to my kids, to Trista, who's 33, to Sam, who's 31, to Tiffany, who's soon be 28. I feel it's my generation's responsibility to do what my dad did for me, because anything less than that, we would be the first generation in the history of the United States of America to turn the country over in worse shape than the previous generation inherited it.
Thank you.
Thank you.